Okay, let's get started. Um, I will share my screen. Here we go. And if anyone has any questions at any time, just pop it in the chat or just go off mute and feel free to ask it. As I mentioned, we will try to be as efficient as possible with this, try to cover the content probably in the next 15 to 20 minutes, and then leave it open for questions at the end. So the topic for today for our office hours is navigating the next transition. The inspiration for this is basically everything that we continue to kind of go through, and it might be different in different parts of the country, but generally speaking, for a lot of parents and caregivers, we're dealing with a lot of just continued uncertainty. And so as we think about, maybe previously we were thinking we would be going to some sort of a next normal. I think the way that we're starting to think about this is just a next transition. And how do we think about that? Again, through the context of kids returning back to school, a lot of workplaces, asking for back to the office, at least in some part. And so this is just a framework of, as we've been talking to a lot of different families, of how you might consider thinking about this. This is very much there are no right answers. It's very much through the lens of a framework of how you might think through it. So as I mentioned, it's more about how to run and raise a family amidst all the uncertainty, all of these choices and all of these decisions we're being asked to make, especially with continued imperfect information. So the three things I'll walk folks through is first, how to choose anchors. And a lot of what I'll be talking about is in this time where there's a lot of noise, a lot of decisions, a lot of options, how we can choose the few things, either the anchors or the priorities, however you want to think about it, but choose those few things that are going to be sort of almost blinders, that those are the things that we're going to optimize for, and everything else is going to have to just kind of either fall by the wayside or just be de-emphasized. The next part, because we really like to come with actual tangible tools that help us instead of just a kind of high level. What are the tools that you can use in doing this? And then the third is just a little bit of an overview of like how to think about thriving in constant uncertainty. In some ways, even without the pandemic, that is what parenthood is. We're trying to constantly make decisions with imperfect information. And so with this additional part layered on, how do we think about that? Just a really quick overview of me. I come from a background of working at lots of really great companies, corporate background, but I left after having my first daughter and started looking at how do we look at technology and its role in helping everyday parents, and how can we lighten the load of everyday parenting. And so today, what Milo looks at is specifically the invisible load. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and especially a topic that disproportionately women end up taking on. But how do we build technology? How do we build something that allows us to be better collaborators with the other folks in our life? But again, technology that can help us with that. And so happy to answer more questions around Milo specifically, but this is between my work with Poppy, which was a childcare startup, and with Milo, I've had the privilege of talking to hundreds, at this point, thousands of parents to kind of see what's happening on their front lines. So the first I'll start with, and this is probably a topic that's, or a concept that's familiar to many, but it's start with the big rocks. It's an idea. There's kind of the story around, you're looking at a kind of a glass vase, and there's these big rocks, there's these medium-sized pebbles, and there's a pile of sand. And the question is, how do you get all of that to fit into this glass vase? And the idea is that if you start with the sand, or you start with kind of the medium-sized rocks, you're never going to fit it all in. But if you put the big rocks in, then layer it in the medium-sized ones, and then pour in the sand to fill in all the rest of the space, that's really the only way that you're going to be able to do that. And I think the first time I came across that analogy, it was such a great one, especially in the space of parenting, but also having your job and your professional and your just like your personal life still. It's that we have to choose what those big rocks are, put those in first, and then time will just get filled up with the rest, that kind of sand stuff. It's my experience. Both my husband and I run companies. We've got two daughters who are now 9 and 7. And this is easier said than done, I will say. It's just, it feels like the sand types of things are just so constant and so prevalent that I'll get to the end of the week and wonder where the week went and whether we actually did it the way that we, felt like was to the priorities. And so I don't want this to sound like, oh, it must be like this and it's simple and it's easy. But I will say on the weeks that we think about proactively, these are the big things that we want to make sure happen, family dinner or whatever it might be. And if the rest kind of falls to the wayside, we end up being okay with that. We've put together a little bit of more of a detailed kind of newsletter on the topic that you could find on this Substack here. But the idea is if you have the opportunity, maybe you have a couple, like an hour or something to have a conversation with your partner, or for you to even just reflect on this by yourself. I would recommend at least notionally thinking through some of these pieces, because it's my observation and my experience personally that we don't necessarily take time, or we haven't been given the opportunity to actually think about, in the same way we do our organizations or our teams, what does success mean for our family? What are the values that we actually want to live by? And then explicitly use those as the frame or the lens through which we're actually making decisions. And that could be everything from what's for dinner, or our point of view on discipline, or how we end up taking a vacation. And so to give you an example, this is just a list of values that you can choose from. You can add your own. These are far from exhaustive. But if you, for example, value creativity, you might discipline a child that has invented a really creative kind of answer to something, versus if your priority or your value is responsibility or respect, or one of these other ones. Again, through the lens of like, there is no right answer, but what for your family, depending on what it is that you prioritize, the answer can look very different from a friend or a neighbor or another school parent. And so these are just a couple of examples, but you might value community. And again, in this time, that might look like something different. For example, making little care packages and dropping them off to neighbors versus play or humor or some of these other pieces. At a high level, if you can at least even consider what some of those things are. And one thing that I found was helpful is that I actually wrote them down in a little notebook as I was living life, because it's really hard to just sit down and say, oh, these are my values. But as we were living life and saying, oh, this actually felt good, or I like to prioritize something like this. And as you and your partner can kind of talk about those things, I think it's like a little bit of a conversation over weeks or even months. And it's certainly not something that's written in stone. It could be reevaluated. And as your kids grow and as your family goes through different phases, you'll probably want to reevaluate and reassess. From that, you can then talk about identifying daily, weekly, monthly, yearly priorities. This is probably the level at which most folks can come in and have a productive conversation. But for example, if priorities, one of our key, 5 values is family, then it might be driving decisions, especially in this time, for example, to have grandparents be a consistent presence in the kid's life. Now, that could even have looked like moving closer to them. That is something in my personal family, what we've done in the last couple of years. We've actually ended up living in the same city as my parents because of one of these priorities. It could look like daily workouts. It could look like, as you're deciding on schools, we're going to prioritize routine and simple logistics. So we're going to choose the school in the neighborhood over a different school that might be, a 15-minute drive away. It can look like family dinner 2 times a week. Or for a lot of us who our jobs might take us to travel, or just might be super demanding from an hour standpoint, it could be, out of the 7 nights, to be around for bedtime 4 times a week. And so these are just a couple of examples to give folks a sense of how you might take something that are like values and actually translate them into priorities. The idea here is, again, not to create a laundry list of things that we then feel guilty about or feel compelled to have to do every single week. They're, again, frameworks and guidelines to say, we value eating meals around a table together because that gives us an opportunity to teach the kids about food, about our culture, and about like have a really great conversation. Well, if that's great, then, you know, family dinners, let's say 2 times a week, would be a really great way to knock a bunch of those things out at the same time, and then kind of set that cadence, but then also set that as a non-negotiable when you're thinking about, oh, there's a really great soccer team opportunity or swim class or something, but it falls over one of these times. It actually makes it a lot easier to say, actually, no, we're not able to kind of do that. And so it actually takes all of those decisions and starts to narrow it in a kind of controlled way. So the next part is, then let's get into the nitty gritty of like actual weeks, because honestly, it's nice to talk about and think about this high level, but it's really about, can I just, you know, get through this week without a lot of huge fires? And so one way that you can do that is to build a blueprint of the work that your family ideally does. You want to really brutally prioritize these based on your values. And so that can look like, and we kind of put that into 3 buckets of the work of the home. The first is childcare, the second is chores, and the third is coordination. And so just to talk through a couple of those. So childcare is all of the hands-on stuff. And depending on how old your kids are, it can be a lot. It's the primary care, it's the bath and hygienes, it's the discipline, the list goes on. You want to be able to write all of those down and ideally be able to set who is the lead on each of those types of things. This is a lot of where, as you have conversations around division of labor and all of these things, these are some of the more visible ones, but you really want to write it down and then be able to say who owns this, how do we as a family do this thing, and so that there's you minimize friction between you know, you might do it differently from your partner. Similarly for chores, and actually, frankly, these are some of the more easier ones because they're so visible. They're the standard ones: dishes, meals, laundry, probably have an already established division. But again, you want to just write it down. And one thing to just note is that make sure that make sure that you're also doing it through the lens of frequency and urgency. And so there is actually studies on this where it can be that one partner takes on more of the frequent and highly urgent tasks versus the other partner takes on still the same number of tasks, but they might be less frequent, like bill pay or you know, yard maintenance, and they could be done on their schedule versus, for example, meals or pickups. Those have to be done at a specific time, and they're quite frequent, in fact, daily. Then the last one, and obviously a topic near and dear to my heart, is the invisible work. As we have, many of us, gone towards dual income families and dual careers, we've had to outsource a lot of the work that was done in the home. So now you've got apps, you've got other helpers to be able to do this. What has happened, though, that this doing work has then transitioned to invisible coordination work. And that's key because, again, disproportionately women end up doing this in their heads or in their like email inboxes and things like that. And so what you want to try to do is, as best as you can, is also make a list of what are these coordination activities that need to be done. What are the kids going to be doing? What kinds of activities? Their schedules, pickups, drop-offs, vacations, school forms, reminders, and also, you know, what we would call the extra stuff like holiday or thank you cards. This is just the quick set of examples. But again, if we go back to values, it could be that holiday and thank you cards feel like something I should be doing, but actually isn't something that I feel really important, like strongly about, or my partner doesn't, and it doesn't really actually align with our high level priorities. Well, then that's something that could probably get kind of dropped off. And so when I say brutally prioritize, I don't have to tell this group what that means, because we're used to that kind of thing, especially at work. but it can feel harder to do at home because we feel this urge to kind of do all of these types of things, especially because we see other friends and colleagues doing it. But once you do that, you have a sense of what's in and what's out. So with that, if there was really one thing I wanted people to take away, and this is something that I've actually learned over my, the last 6 or 7 years, even personally, it's to spend 20 minutes Sunday planning. Call it whatever you want, weekly planning, just a quick overview, whatever it might be. But for me, I've
It's
found
actually really good.
What's that? So this is probably like the single best thing that you can do, and the medium is not important. It could be an email, it could be a piece of paper, it could be a whiteboard, and obviously I'll share a little bit about how we think about this with Milo. But the idea is in the same way that probably a lot of us open up our work calendars, see what kind of meetings, what kind of projects, what kind of deadlines we have, and then we just start mentally getting ourselves prepared and anticipating the tricky spots. Maybe there's travel. Ooh, those meetings are really tight. And so we start building up backup plans. We need that same thinking in a lot of the stuff that we're doing at home. And so we know how to do it. A lot of us just don't find or haven't put the frame in to be able to actually do it. So if you were to cover 5 topics, my suggestion is priorities this week, key logistics, meals, to-dos. And I don't want to lose sight of like the actual reason we're doing all this, which is like have fun and family time. And so this is just one suggestion. Just lay out the week and just start writing down, not everything, but kind of the key stuff. So in this example week for my family, I have a meeting early on Tuesday. That's to mean, doesn't really matter who's it with or any of that kind of stuff. It's more that I'm just going to be out on Tuesday morning. And so don't rely on me for help. There's dentist appointments. There's a lot of times you want to put the one-offs on here because that's going to actually change the general contours of the week. So things like crazy hair day or no school, what's the childcare plan? Then I'm always, I never used to be a meal plan person because I thought that was just something that was very intense and just wasn't me. But what I found was when I just had a sense of what we wanted to eat, and it literally was at the level of like tacos, takeout, whatever it was, then I could proactively plan for groceries. It just felt like a small thing, but you felt more in control. We were wasting less food, ordering takeout, frankly, less money, felt healthier, all those types of things. And so whether that's the case or not, I would recommend folks to even just give it a shot of just like proactively thinking of like, what are a couple of things you might want to eat? You can change them around or things like that. You want to put like maybe key chores on there, like take out trash because of the schedule. And then I haven't put it on here really, but if you wanted like the family dinner night, or let's say Saturday mornings are blocked off for some kind of adventure every week, also kind of layer that on. So everyone's on the same page. Again, disproportionately, most of us have a lot of people in the mix. And so for myself, it's my husband, myself, our nanny, and my mom. It is really hard to have everyone on the same page about what's going on if we don't have something like this. So again, you can do it with anything, a whiteboard, email. This is just one, how we're working on it with Milo is that for me, there's a strong hypothesis that you want to make it as simple as possible so that you can text in or forward in emails and you can kind of see things here that are coming in, but that you have something super simple for everyone to just kind of work off of. And so this is just a general kind of whiteboard. But what I think is actually helpful is that you actually have suggestions on things. So over time, if we know what kinds of meals you kind of like, we can actually suggest a lineup of meals. And if that works for you, you literally hit enter and it comes in. Or things that are happening in the community this weekend, things that your friends might be going out and doing. You can, again, just see that and then bring it in. And then one thing we're launching this back to school is actually we connect to your kids' school calendars. So you just tell us what school your kids go to, we pull that in. And so then you're able to see things like, oh, wear PJs day, and you just bring that in. Or there's that bike camp that I wanted the kids to go to. You hit enter and you see some of that. For me, a lot of this is the role of technology, which is each of us is trying to do our best in running our families and kind of focusing on work or whatever else it might be in our lives. I think there's a huge opportunity where we could be leveraging our collective, or, to use the adage of like the village, if each of us is kind of able to kind of pull in, or I see that swim registration is next week, I send it in, somebody else sends in crazy hair day or whatever it is, but then all of us benefit. And so that's just one way that we see, take the base of like, yes, I need to anticipate what's going on, but we can layer on in a way that benefits all of us. The next topic I'll just quickly cover is build your bench. This is a topic that I learned a lot about while I was building Poppy, which is a childcare startup. And it's this idea that a lot of us don't have a very deep bench, or it needs to be as deep as our weeks are crazy. And so for my family, and I was traveling a lot a couple of years ago. My husband had an intense schedule, and so we actually had to build quite a deep bench with nannies, sitters, neighbors, things like that, to be able to have the coverage for the inevitable things that would kind of go on in a week. In this context, mid-pandemic, all of these types of things, a couple of things I might suggest of how you might want to think about this, because not all of us live near family or have some of this. The first is obviously like, family, friends. If you developed a pod relationship with a family, then just being that clear about like, these are the places that I need help. What are the places that I can have your back, and then continue that relationship. But other suggestions are folks that have the same schedule patterns. So for example, if you have other families that go to the same school, can you also have a conversation of like, hey, if there's a day that, we're just in a snafu or something, can you run the kids to the school, and be sure that you're comfortable with, like car seats and driving and all that kind of stuff. But or explicitly go on the same soccer team or swim with a friend. Not only does that have the benefit that the kids are happy that there's a friend on that in that activity, but that gives you a little bit of backup and coverage on if there's something else that you need from pickups, drop-offs, any of those types of things. And then the last, of course, is the professionals. It's again, it's a little bit trickier in this time, but I've always found such an incredible, once you do the work of finding the right people that can support your family, having folks that you can just really hand the kids off to and know that it's being covered, with whether it's nannies, sitters, any of those types of things. I've always been such a big believer in that. Just a couple of kind of last thoughts on schedule hacks. So, as I've kind of seen the way that different families do things, these are just, again, some suggestions on when you're in it, it's just really hard. You're just in it. You're trying to do all the work things, all the home things. And if you don't have preset kind of chunks, it can be really hard to set them up in the week as you're going. You might have had the intention of like, oh, maybe Tuesday we'll go out for a drink with your partner or a friend or something. Or, oh, maybe I'll find time to write or work out. My experience is that, especially with the busyness and the added complexity of everything that's going on, it just doesn't happen. And so there are some ways that you can kind of preset that, pre-negotiate that, and then just carve out that space. So preset blocks of time. So for example, in my world, every Wednesday night, my mom comes over. It used to be at the very beginning, every single week was a conversation. Do you need me? Do you not? And I really didn't love that, because then I had to justify it. At some point, we just said every Wednesday night, it's your night with the girls, and you're just going to come over. Now it gives both my husband and I the leeway to say, we're going to work late, we're going to go out for a date night, we're going to go do a bike ride, or just have the time for ourselves. But it's so nice knowing that you don't have to negotiate it. It's already set there, and everyone just kind of knows their places and they go and do that. Optimizing for long blocks of uninterrupted time. I probably don't have to tell you the importance of this, but one of my findings in a lot of this is that there might be an hour that you think that you're getting an hour of block of time. And I struggle with this a lot. My office is right off the landing. I hear the kids, and there's a lot of kind of interruptions. And it's just a different quality of work that happens when you have kind of 15 chunks that are interrupted, 15-minute chunks that are blocked into 1 hour versus 2 hours of just heads down time without any interruptions, without any kind of like noise or anything like that. So can you optimize for those long blocks of uninterrupted time, because you'll just be less burnt out and less kind of thinking on multiple different levels. Set expectations and boundaries. I think that's a hard one, especially with the kids, and we're a year and a half into this. But there are ways to kind of involve the kids and make it as fun as possible. For example, in my office, there's a corner down here where there is a pillow and markers and things like that. And so for most types of meetings, the kids know that they're always welcome in here, but that they would go to that space, and they can go color or whatever they want to do. And then use trades liberally. I think if you're fortunate to have the types of friends and things like that, that you're able to trust on some of this stuff, do trades. So we'll take the kids on Saturday morning and go for bike rides. If you can take my kids, the Sunday morning or whatever else that is. So just thinking about it, and it could also be not even just childcare, it could be meals. We'll make extra meals on Monday and Tuesday, you make extra meals on Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll just swap. Just think about the general landscape of things. What are things that is easy to swap and share, and things that you're not really excited about doing yourself all the time, and see if you can find a fit for that. I'll end on this general concept of dealing with uncertainty. Again, these are just observations and suggestions. It really is around the focus, around returning to the values and priorities over and over. What are the non-negotiables around your health, around education, your social life, work? Without judgment, kind of figure out within your family unit what is right. And then that makes it so much easier to advocate for that to the outside world. Have multiple plans sounds super obvious, but it is kind of hard in practice. And what that means is that when you're writing down your week's plan, even make asterisks on, ooh, this is going to be a tricky spot because your partner has an early meeting and so do you. And so if there's any kind of issue with childcare, that's going to be a problem. Okay, if that's the case, then do you have someone to call in as potential backup? Things like that, just even thinking through or having those conversations with the people that you would want to kind of fill in. Simpler is better than overwhelmed. Again, I say that's easier said than done. But especially right now, headed into this fall with a lot of uncertainty and complexity, the more you're able to put blinders on for your family, the more you'll probably be able to kind of deal with all of this already starting from a very burnt out place. And the last is something that one of my earliest mentors told me early in my career, but I find a lot of resonance even in personal situations, just a 6-month rule. In my career, I've traveled and lived in a lot of different places. And the thing that allowed me to kind of take a leap and do something that felt a little bit more uncomfortable was the 6-month rule of make the best decision available to you with the information available to you. And don't spend any more time evaluating and worrying unless and until new information becomes available. And then reevaluate at the 6-month mark. How is that actually working? Right now, with so much uncertainty, 3 months also can make sense. But it's this idea of do not constantly wear at yourself and your brain on constantly trying to figure out whether this is the right answer or not. And so these are just some examples that you might think through and start with what is the goal, and you might be able to have different answers than a friend or a colleague. For school, are you optimizing for logistics, for achievement, building a really just strong foundation? Kids activities, do you want the kids to be specializing? Do you want to just get them a broad set of skills? Is it, like, let's be candid, a lot of times just childcare that you need them in a safe kind of space? The more that we're very explicit about what we need the goal to be, the more that we're actually okay with the choices that end up coming out of it. So that was a lot, but that's basically the gist of what I wanted to cover from a content standpoint. I'll just quickly take a look at, okay, so no questions. If anyone has any questions or comments, happy to field them.
Just a quick question. I love what you have presented here. How would you recommend adapting some of this for times when you're a sole caregiver, or perhaps you're the only caregiver in your family? What would you recommend?
Absolutely. I would actually recommend this, but just on hyperdrive. So what I mean by that is I think it is even more important, some of the topics around the bench, and the priorities and the schedule hacks. So what I mean by that is if you're able to then say, okay, we're going to have to be even more brutal on prioritizing, but what are the most important things? So I'm going to be a sole caregiver for this period of time or for whatever else it is. I have to make these decisions. Okay, let's just take after school time. I want to prioritize the age of kids right now. I want to prioritize time with the kids. I want them learning. But I'm also going to have to be kind of either monitoring email or whatever else it might be. So it can't be like crazy. We can't be going on crazy adventures around like town or things like that, or from a safety standpoint. Well, then I would consider what are some ways that you could frame that and come up with either activities or come up with either swaps or have caregivers actually come in for those types of periods of time. The point is, um, especially when you're a sole caregiver, whether it's during the week your partner is traveling or you're a single parent or whatever that might be, it's actually more imperative that you find the other folks that can fill in the slots. In my scenario, I do have my partner, so it's the two of us sort of like lead. But if he's traveling or if I'm traveling, then we have to find other people to slot into that very prominent kind of role. And so the first thing I would suggest is definitely start with who can be in your bench. And that can be such a wide ranging type of thing. And if you don't have close family and friends, then you might have to be very tactical, which is for this block of time, I'm going to put this person in. For this block of time, I'm going to put this person in. The other thing I'll just suggest is in this context, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it is so excruciatingly exhausting to be that role. And so I would also then turn to the schedule hacks, which is how do you pre or upfront set up those times that are going to have you being as good to yourself, or like you call whatever you want, the self-care, whatever it is. The truth of the matter is it's that oxygen mask analogy. But it could be, so for example, both my husband and I, because of our types of jobs, we would just feel super anxious on the weekends and find the other person just like kind of like doing a little bit of work on the side. What we realized is that both of us needed just like a 3 to 4 hour chunk dedicated on the weekends. And as long as we knew that, then we could actually be more present at the rest of the time. Well, now that when we identified that, we actually then just decided to have a sitter. And so now we have a sitter every Sunday from 4 to 8 p.m. And it's amazing for everyone. The kids love it. They have a little bit of extra playtime. We both know that that's going to be there for us at the end of the weekend, so we can then focus on actual quality time for the rest of the time. And then if we don't need the whole 4 hours, then we go for a walk or we do something else. But the fact that we've actually, that ended up being so crucial for all the things, for our our health, our mental health, our being present. But that's just one suggestion. It sometimes feels decadent, privileged, all of those types of things. Equally, if we were in a position that we weren't able to prioritize paying that sitter, I would have then found a friend to swap with. It's that important. So that's just a suggestion. And hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you very much.
Anything else? Great. Well, thanks for joining, and we'll be sharing the recording and hopefully a little bit helpful to just frameworks on how to think about navigating this next transition.